And this moment is a special moment, because at this moment there is the potential that exists within our students to spread this change and to bring about a happiness revolution. A peaceful revolution that will increase levels of well-being around the world. A revolution that will generate not just more well-being, not just more happiness, but also more health and more goodness, more generosity, more kindness. This is about making the world a better place. This is about making a meaningful difference. And when I think about it, I know that this is the moment. Right now, right here, together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello again.
It's wonderful to see you here, to hear you, to know your presence. You know, we always start these conversations by having you share with us in the chat where you're from. So please share from wherever and whenever you are. You know, we have these conversations every 1 month or so, and it's with different experts in different field. When I say we are the Happiness Studies Academy. We were founded for the purpose of spreading happiness in individuals, in relationships, in schools, organizations, and nations. We have thousands of students from over 70 countries participating in our year-long certificate program, which launches every 4 months, the next one being on February 1st. And we're currently in the midst of getting an accredited master's degree in happiness studies, which we hope to formally announce in the next month or two. So we're here today to talk about nutrition, food, and its relationship to happiness. So Uma, let me very quick introduction. You are known as Harvard's mood food expert. You're a national best-selling author of "This Is Your Brain on Food," and we can't wait to hear what you write about there, because in your book you talk about cutting-edge science explaining the way in which food contributes to our mental health and how a sound diet can help treat and prevent a wide range of psychological and cognitive health issues, from ADHD to anxiety, depression, OCD, and others. So I'd love to hear more, but before you start, Uma, you know, I remember reading a book by David Servan-Schreiber. David Servan-Schreiber was a world-renowned psychiatrist, passed away just a few years ago. And I remember in his introduction to his book, he says that the 20th century was the century of antibiotics. You know, that saved, you know, countless lives around the world. And he says the 21st century will be the century of nutrition. So I'm eager to hear. Do you agree? I suspect you do. And if so, why?
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful question. And I appreciate sort of that information in terms of the background, just having that background. You know, I think that I definitely agree. And I feel like this century is really about the use of nutrition, but also lifestyle measures. I think that the food as medicine movement has gained a lot of momentum. And I also feel that people are searching for more solutions or more tools in the toolbox, whether it's mental health or even physical health. So with conditions like Alzheimer's being thought of or called type 3 diabetes, we are understanding that there's this connection around nutrition and our lifestyle. And my feeling, to answer that question more succinctly, is that yes, antibiotics are life-saving. So are psychiatric medications. They've saved the lives of many of my patients. But there's a time and place for each of these. And I think that the use of antibiotics has been overly prescribed. Now that we're understanding the newest science of the gut microbiome and its impact, the impact of antibiotics, and how we can maybe use them in a more thoughtful way, but we're also understanding how we can nurture those gut microbes through how we eat, we are finding more solutions. And I think that that's where the cutting edge is at. And for mental health, it's this new emerging science called psychobiotics, which is really what I hope to be the manipulation of the gut microbiome to treat different mental health conditions. Will that exclude the use of prescriptive medications for very serious conditions? Absolutely not. People may still require ECT, TMS, lithium, other medications that are still prescribed, but I think it offers more solutions for those individuals who may not have as serious a condition in mental health. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. And so I have a few questions that I'll ask, and then we'll open it up. I'm sure people are eager to ask you questions. So another question that I have is, so you talk about how it can help, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, attention hyperactivity deficit disorder, ADHD, and anxiety, depression, and I'd like to hear specific prescriptions from you in a minute. But before I do, is it important just for people who are dealing with these mental challenges, psychological challenges, or should we all be concerned with the role of nutrition on psychological health?
Honestly, we should all be concerned because, and here's why: the importance of feeling well, feeling happy. I mean, I'm speaking to the expert here. Can also be assisted through these additional means. And nutrition is, we eat every day. Many of us eat several meals a day. It's a basic tenet of how we live our lives. Why not use it to our best advantage? And I learned even more deeply about this need, Tal, during the pandemic, because I found that many people, firstly, couldn't access medical care, were not able to attend appointments, were dealing with telehealth, and even then were not getting into a therapy appointment, for example. So they needed more solutions while they were on their own at home. Their kitchens became a lab, and some people began or started cooking more. And I think that it provided a powerful tool. That's one reason. I think that I would like people to think about nutrition in terms of their mental health as a lifestyle measure, not something you don't just, eat healthy to lose 5 pounds for the Oscars or for a wedding. We want to be doing this all the time because we want to be feeling at our emotional best. The other part of this is the fact that our physical health will also be helped. And why not, have the benefit of both? Now, when it goes into the specific mental health conditions, in my book, I go into a little nuances around each condition. But if we're just talking, can it help us? Absolutely. The third and also important reason is that psychiatry and mental health in the United States, psychiatrists and mental health clinicians use the DSM-5, and there's soon to be an update on that, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. But here's the issue. People do not fall into checkbox lists. Many people have a little bit of OCD and some sadness. Some people have anxiety and have had a traumatic event in their lives. People very often fall into these gray zones, which are between these categories. And here's where nutrition and sort of a holistic and integrated approach that I practice and feel strongly about becomes important. It's not just one solution, but it's how many things can I do to feel better? And that's really how I think about this approach.
So before we go into the more specific prescriptions, I think the thing that strikes me most about the whole field of nutrition is that there is a great deal of confusion there.
Yes.
So there's a school of thought that talks about, okay, well, let's go vegan, and they actually cite research showing why vegan is better for us. And then there are the paleos, and then there are the fructarians, and there are so many different isms and approaches, and there's so much research that points to the value of the different approaches. Where do you come in?
So I think that is another excellent point, and I feel one that I feel quite strongly about, because I feel that the clients who come to see me are confused. They don't know which way to turn, which food to include or exclude on a particular day, which diet should they follow. And the way I approach it, Tal, is that I'm diet agnostic, meaning that it doesn't matter what I eat. But if you're coming to see me because of my expertise in nutritional psychiatry, I'm there to guide you to the best form of whatever you're eating. I happen to call it a diet, but it's just whatever you're eating. And here's where, whether it's a plant-based movement or the carnivore movement, anywhere in between, or any exclusion or inclusion of a certain food becomes confusing. I would rather take the diet you're eating, see what you enjoy, but also, most importantly, inform you of the things you may not realize that you are consuming, which are problematic. Here's a great example. I speak about dairy or non-dairy plain yogurt being a healthy source of probiotics, a healthy food for your gut. But, I also talk about blueberries being healthy, and people will eat a fruited yogurt with blueberries. But a half cup serving can have 8 teaspoons of added sugar. So there's a great example of, specifics around food where you may be thinking you're eating something healthy, but actually you're consuming a lot of added sugar. You could still eat a plain version of that yogurt, add frozen or fresh blueberries and a sprinkle of cinnamon, and be eating far less sugar. So taking what someone is eating, working with them on the things to limit, and in some cases avoid, depending on their symptoms, becomes key. But really not falling into, well, if you eat this, something will happen. It's not about the research. I think that anyone in nutrition science can argue on a given day that if you quote a study on, say, omega-3s and say these are good for your mental health and good for this, I can also quote a study that has said, guess what? These particular data show that it isn't. There's always that argument. And nutrition science is not funded the way that big pharma is funded. So a study on risperidone or Risperdal, which is a major antipsychotic used in mental health, would never be compared to a nutrition science trial where the funding is not there. So there are several issues around that which we have to acknowledge, but then also understand that in nutrition, you can argue, you can always provide studies that support something. It's about the fact that our microbiome is now really like a thumbprint. It's very unique. So a healthy food for you may not be a healthy food for me. And that is why tweaking that personalized nutrition plan for nutritional psychiatry becomes key. So I'd rather work with someone in that way than to guide them in a way that is more confusing.
One of the distinctions that we make at the Happiness Studies Academy is between research and me-search. And so, the research would be the general principles, universal, maybe cultural. The me-search would be, what's unique about my needs. And what I hear you saying is that when it comes to nutrition, a lot of me-search is in order.
It's absolutely the case. And I love that. I'm going to start borrowing that from you, Tal, but it's what I call one of the 6 pillars of nutritional psychiatry, and I call it body intelligence. So pay attention to that meal or that food or that beverage that you had, because you have a certain feeling. Many people don't associate that and continue consuming something. And I think that your word for it is much more elegant. The me-search is really what we work on as body intelligence. So paying attention to seeing if that really works for you or not.
And Uma, you say pay attention in terms of how it makes me feel. Is there also a way that you carry out research physiologically? I mean, do you test the people's reactions to certain foods?
So if someone has an allergy and intolerance, there are obviously tests we can do
Sure.
to work with it. I'll just work together with me to figure that out. But in terms of a symptom, often what I'm asking people to do is pay attention and log that symptom. Sometimes, people have eaten a certain lunch and they don't realize that their brain fog, like headache in the early evening or afternoon, is related to that food they're consistently eating. Sometimes it's almost like being a detective and working on this food puzzle with them. So unless it's a specific symptom they come up with, then we can test things like inflammation in the body or responses to certain things. But no, it's not, in this research, I'm not necessarily doing a blood test or other test.
Okay.
It's more of recording a history. And one of the most helpful things in this way is a 24-hour recall of your food, because it's been shown in research to be the most effective than having people complete a food diary, which sometimes gets a little bit hazy after and a little bit inaccurate. So asking them that, and then giving them the guide to paying attention to the research of body intelligence is important too.
So I get the personalized approach. Are there universal truths that you would feel comfortable standing behind? So foods that you would say, this is a good food for your mood.
Absolutely. So, I think that it starts off with some basic tenets. I think that people sometimes don't know the difference between these, or they do, but don't realize how beneficial they are. There are prebiotic foods that we can eat. Rather than turn to a supplement, why not we try food first? And prebiotic foods are things like the allium family: garlic, leeks, onions, jicama, and several other things.
A little slower, because I'm writing this down. So garlic,
okay.
Yeah.
It's all in the book, don't worry. Garlic, leeks, onions, the allium family to start, because that's something we're putting in our soups during winter and our stews. So
is it okay? Is it okay stewing them? It's okay cooking them. They don't lose their value.
It's okay, if you're using an oven, oven roasting with something like avocado oil. If you're cooking them, obviously there are unhealthy cooking methods like deep frying, that type of stuff. So if you're cooking them, yes, they are beneficial to you. But I also like people to, as they're chopping up, say, their veggies for a roasted vegetable dish, to eat some of the clean washed veggies and crunch on that too, or add it to a salad, because that combination gives you biodiversity for your microbiome as well. So if we were, just to think about prebiotics, that's one group, and it's a simple thing to do. You don't actually have to reach for a supplement. Maybe you need it. Maybe a gastroenterologist would like you to do that, but that's a good one. Then there are actually fermented foods. A very important study published in August of 2021 in a very reputable journal called Cell was conducted by researchers at Stanford. And one of the things that they uncovered in the study was that fermented foods, almost every culture has a fermented food, actually help to reduce inflammation in the gut. Now, I mentioned earlier on that things like Alzheimer's are being called type 3 diabetes. This is related to the process of insidious inflammation that gets set up in organs like the gut. And when you eat fermented foods, they lower the inflammation. So there's an easy thing that we can do to many different meals in the day. We're not talking a huge amount. We're talking a little bit of kimchi or kefir if you consume dairy, miso, tempeh, different things that you can add in, which bring back live active cultures to the gut microbiome and really sustain you that way. So those, I really think that gut strengthening foods, let's say, are great for you. Then another simple category which people ignore are plant-based foods. So we get fiber from plants such as fruit, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, legumes, healthy whole grains, and we cannot get fiber from meat and animals protein or seafood. Doesn't mean you should not consume them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying pay attention to plant-based foods, because fiber is such an important nutrient for for the gut microbiome. So an easy thing to do. These all, there are studies of, plant-based foods and mood, There are studies around fermented foods and mood. There are studies that compare the use of a probiotic supplement that compared taking a supplement to a dose of Prozac for mood. And the probiotic came out on top. So these have been studied consistently. And my feeling about these, they're not prescriptive, but they can be easily done. And why not do it if it can help you feel better? And so I have a list of things like that we can, that I feel comfortable saying to people.
Great. And you mentioned, for example, a probiotic supplement. What is your take on supplements in general?
Absolutely. So I would like people to understand that you can't out supplement a bad diet. Just like people have heard, you can't exercise out of a bad diet. It's similar with supplements. So if you're sort of eating at the local fast food restaurant every day, you can't just take that probiotic or that prebiotic or that omega-3 supplement and correct everything. It's about the lifestyle, slow and steady changes that you're able to make. So I'm not against supplements. And in fact, in certain instances, for example, saffron, which is a very delicate, delicious, and expensive spice, has shown a tremendous amount of positive research in terms of improvement of mood. But the culinary use of saffron, you only use a few threads for, paella, risotto, or in Indian food, we make biryani. The issue is you're not going to get the same impact from the use of just a few threads of that spice. So in that instance, the studies show that a much higher dose of saffron was needed and a supplement there would be appropriate. So I think there's definitely a place for supplements, but I think it's really based on test, don't guess. So for example, in the Northeast where I reside, many people may be deficient in vitamin D because of the levels of sunshine. Have your doctor check that. That's an easy, you can certainly eat foods, but you can also just take a supplement to get you out of that low range if needed.
Yeah. Great. So let's get to specifics. Let's begin with, right now during the pandemic, levels of anxiety are at an all-time high. Yeah. What do you prescribe, Doc?
I think so. So let's start with a few things that I truly believe in, and we'll move towards the food. I think that when someone is feeling stressed and anxious, as a psychiatrist, I think the worst thing you can say to someone is calm down, take a deep breath, because they're in the midst of a panic attack. They're feeling horrible. Their system is in overdrive. So I like people the rest of the time to actually be practicing things like mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises, knowing that they should always be hydrating, because if you're dehydrated, you can actually, I've seen people have a panic attack, not realizing that they're dehydrated. Even, spending time outdoors, something that calms you. Maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's taking a walk in nature, a yoga exercise, or maybe a dance class, something that, almost, my patients will say, I do this dance exercise, or I do this, I get on a certain gym, piece of gym equipment, and I burn it off because I exercise for that 20 minutes. It makes me feel better and it works off that angst. So there are lots of things that go along with anxiety. It's not just a unique food or one thing that you should do. So having those as part of your armor become important. The next step is looking at how you're eating. And if you've either picked up unhealthy habits during the pandemic, or there's certain foods that really can drive anxiety. And one of the ones that I list in my book is artificial sweeteners, which many people don't realize actually worsen anxiety. They disrupt the gut microbiome. And sometimes people feel like they're coming off sugar and they're kind of trying to cut down, so they go to diet soda, or they start buying everything that they eat as a low sugar version. And often these have artificial sweeteners. Then there are the, sort of working through that list of stuff to be careful about. And this is one time when actually gluten does show up as something that can worsen anxiety. So you might have celiac disease. You may have a condition called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. These are things your doctor can check for you. If, those are pretty obvious where you need to remove gluten from your diet. But if you just are noticing that, you've done a lot of cleaning up of your diet and adjusting, but you're still having that sandwich for lunch and your anxiety is persisting, maybe look at gluten. I'm not saying every person with anxiety needs to exclude gluten. It's very much case by case, but it's something to look at. So, the first thing you want to do, and there's a longer list of things you want to be careful about, but the foods that you can add in are actually things like omega-3 fatty acids actually help anxiety. And a human study of medical students showed that they improved anxiety. It was a supplemental form. But again, whether you take a supplement, that's completely fine. Maybe you don't eat seafood or like seafood, but it's easily available. Omega-3s are easily available in things like fatty sea fish, sardines, anchovies, and wild sockeye salmon, easy to obtain. The short chain omega-3s, less available because of the conversion, available in walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, and more. So, another thing you can turn to. Turmeric, a spice that is, people have heard about now and are hearing about many different categories. Turmeric with a pinch of black pepper has a good amount of evidence. The black pepper hack is just to make it more bioavailable to your brain and your body, which research has shown. But just having turmeric, having it in a tea, a soup, a smoothie, a quarter teaspoon with a pinch of black pepper just to start, has a good amount of evidence to helping anxiety over time. So those are two things to get you started right now, which are not that difficult. If you don't have turmeric, you can buy a nice organic spice at your supermarket, or just if you want to start with a supplement, you can, but it's something that can help over time.
Great. Let's move to depression.
So, one of the things, my patients, it's really funny, Charles, because my patients will say, why is it that my doctor just tells me to eat a salad? Well, it turns out there's a lot more to the salad than meets the eye because of the actually a few reasons. Probably I can come up with at least 5. But the first thing is that leafy greens are very rich in folates. So think romaine lettuce, dandelion greens, arugula, all types of, the greenery that goes into our salad. They're rich in folate, and low folate levels are associated with depression. Folate is also vitamin B9. So here's an easy way to not only include a salad for a good reason, but be eating those leafy greens, and then build on that with the colors of the rainbow, which actually to have a lot of importance, more than people realize, because those different colors of the vegetables, or even say berries like blueberries, they have rich plant polyphenols, which are really important anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties in them, which are helpful to our body, our mind, our gut, and they are easy to do. Plus, they're rich in fiber, like I mentioned before, in addition to which they have vitamins and minerals and nutrients. So these are more power packed than meets the eye. And I think often overlooked, and I often get the eye roll from clients who are like, why do I need to eat a salad? Well, there's more to it than meets the eye initially. So those are some easy building blocks. Omega-3s feature in depression very strongly and are a good way to go. But there's another tip about depression that I like people to know, which is that there's an ingredient that is used as a preservative in processed meats and cheeses and preserved foods, nitrates. And unfortunately, these have been shown to worsen depression. I also think it's the association in those products with other processed ingredients, which are not helpful. So it's a good thing to think about if you're not feeling great. This is the time of the year with the level of sunlight being low, where people may experience kind of the blues or seasonal affective disorder. So it's just something to think about as well.
Great. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and again, there are many obviously conditions, and you do elaborate on them in your book. But anything particular for headaches or migraines?
So interesting. And also, Tal, just to mention, in the book, each chapter has a list of foods to avoid and foods to embrace. The foods, you'll be happy to know, the foods to embrace are much longer, but they're long lists of foods that you're going to work through. And they're really meant for you to look at and start to incorporate. But, interestingly, with migraines and headaches, I think that one wants to kind of understand what's going on with the person. For example, it can be as simple as dehydration. It can be as simple as something that maybe you're doing differently in your day, your level of stress. It could be associated with tension. So you want to make sure that, you know, you've checked all of that out with your doctor and there isn't something that they're missing. But some good ways to go: always have, you know, whether you're going on Zoom meetings, always have a sustainable water bottle with you that you can refill when you can. Some of them actually have the water filter in them. So wherever you are, you know, you can pretty much fill up on water that's filtered and be hydrating throughout the day. That's just a good habit. Also, like I said, making sure that your doctor has checked out anything else. But you know, there are also foods that have glutamates in them. So monosodium glutamate is the one people know about. And sometimes there are glutamates in natural foods, which may not be so-called bad foods, but just you may not realize that. So you want to make sure that if you're, and I had this experience recently, about a month ago, I ate at a new type of restaurant that I hadn't eaten at before. And it was a certain type of cuisine, it was Asian cuisine. And I developed a headache almost within a half hour of eating this meal.
Wow.
And I, you know, called back and I just asked them how they prepare their food. And, you know, they were very open about using MSG in their food. And so I realized that, you know, that was not only paying attention to the research and body intelligence, but that it had an effect. So you want to be careful of that depending on where you eat, because it could set off I don't have migraines, but it could have set off a migraine in someone who suffers from that.
Yeah.
So
Great. So I have one short question left, but before I do, after I ask the question, we're going to open it up for your questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please put your hand up. It's that under reactions, that yellow hand. We'll call on you, and then it would be great if you can turn your video on so that we can see you as well as hear you. But here is my final question. So Uma, rumor has it that you are a wicked chef. So I would like you to tell us what your favorite dish is.
Absolutely.
The one that you make. Yeah.
You know, this is tough for me because I like so many different foods. But one of my favorite things to experiment with is spices. So I grew up eating a lot of spices, and really, as I understood the nutritional benefit and the benefit to the brain, I embraced them more. One of the things I love to do is turn dishes around. So I happen to be raised vegetarian. Other members of my family eat anything, but I happen to be vegetarian. I cook anything, but I love to make, if I'm making something for the rest of the family that I can make in the vegetarian form, I love to do that. So we're kind of eating the same thing, eating the same spices, just a different source of protein. So one of my favorites is cauliflower steak, but I make either my grandmother's home sort of recipe for masala, which is a mixed blend of spices, or I make a tikka masala recipe for that. And so, you know, say there's chicken tikka masala that's the rest of the family is eating, I'm having that as a cauliflower steak or made with cauliflower. So I love changing it up that way because it makes the food flavorful. I know there's a brain benefit, and then I'm eating things I like. So that's one of my favorites.
I like that. So it's combining brain benefit and just sheer pleasure of eating.
Sheer pleasure of eating and mixing it up, you know, making it different. So my kitchen is my canvas, so to speak, and I love to play with food. So.
Wonderful. Yeah, I must say, as you were answering this question, I was actually regretting asking it, because at least now I'm salivating, and I'm sure so many people on this call are. Thank you, Uma. So we're going to turn to our audience for questions. Why don't we start with Perla? Can you just unmute yourself, please?
Hello, Tal. Hello, Dr. Noom. My question is two things. How much quantity do you need to eat of these certain healthy foods or prebiotics, or for them to really have an effect, and you can notice it, you know, because it, you know, with food, sometimes when you're not such a disciplined person, you know, you eat and you enjoy foods in different ways. But when you think of food as being medicine for you, how much do you need to do this so that it really has an effect on you? That's my first question.
Absolutely.
Perla, can we keep it at one, please? Because we have many people with their hands up. Thank you very much.
So, Paula, thank you for that question. The best way to answer that is that there are some specifics. For example, leafy greens are rich in folate. If you enjoy those and you consume them, 3 to 5 cups a day is a good way to go, believe it or not, because it's a great way to get enough nutrients in a different way. With other foods, it's less specific. It's more about that continuum of taking the foods that you want to sort of slightly cut back on. Maybe it's processed packaged foods. My tip about this, if it has an expiration date, it's probably not a whole food, because when you go to the store and buy an apple or an orange, there's no expiration date on it, right? So if it has one, it's probably something that's processed or ultra processed. We can't in normal life avoid those, but you want to think about any of those habits that you've picked up on that you might want to try to trim back. Then set yourself on a goal of making these slow and steady lifestyle changes, because we know from research that the healing of the gut microbiome, which will help reduce symptoms in mental health, certainly, and also help physical symptoms, really happens over around 28 to 30 days. We also know that the moment you start to eat healthier foods and give up the fast food restaurants and maybe those milkshakes or highly sugared foods that a person may be eating, your gut microbes respond within a 24-hour period. You may not feel it, but they're starting to change. So the moment you make that change, I have had clients come in and say within a week, within a few days, I'm starting to feel better. Hard to know if that's placebo or not, but I think that the power of making those changes is really important. And you could start to feel better within a week, but give it about a month for that healing to happen and make slow changes.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Slow and steady, right? Because you want it to be sustainable. You know, this is not 10 days of a strict diet to lose weight for the wedding, because then the weight comes back after the wedding, right? So we want this to be sustainable.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Jana.
Hello, thank you very much for a very interesting webinar. And my question is very specific. I organize happiness retreats, and my idea for people in 1 week feel relaxed, have space to think about important questions about their life. And I'm trying to do maximum healthy menu, but I don't want it to make, like in some retreats, it's very restrict, with very like a vegetarian, vegan. My idea is to make it healthy but tasty. So we have even maybe a little bit of sweets or something, but of course healthy way. But maybe you could tell me and give me advice, like top 3 food that I should include to help people in that week to maybe to grow their happiness hormones in their body in that time, or maybe top 3 food that I should avoid. For example, I have question about meat, because many people say that meat makes people aggressive and it's not very, takes a lot of time to digest. So we think worst when we eat meat.
So in all honesty, I think this is a longer question and something that requires a little bit more time, because we did mention in my conversation with Tal, we did mention several foods that could help improve your mood. When it comes to the discussion around meat versus plant-based options, like I said, studies could support either. Often for if someone consumes seafood, poultry, or meat, it's the source, it's the quality, it's the amount that they're eating. All of that is important. It's not just let's give up a certain food. If someone consumes those foods, it's perfectly fine, but the source becomes important. Using things like regenerative farming, looking for pastured sources of meat if they have access. Not everyone has access. So that's a separate discussion around food insecurity, food deserts, and things like that. So it's a longer answer to your question, but I think if you took notes when we were talking, there's several foods you'd have picked up on.
And Thank you, Jana. And related to Jana's question, so mixing different kinds of food when you offer them as buffet, is that okay? So it's okay to mix the fruit with the meat and the vegetables? Is that okay?
When you say mix them, eat them together, or
yeah, well, they're on the table and
right.
people take them and they'll take the fruit as dessert.
Right. So so eating foods together, unless someone has some sort of difficulty with that or condition which prevents that, then they should be concerned. But if not, there's no harm in consuming different foods. But again, with fruit, it's the source of the fruit, the type of fruit. If someone in mental health, they have to be careful because some individuals come in who are on a medication that has caused weight gain, or they have a comorbid condition along with whatever they're coming in to see me that has, say, caused them to gain weight, or that they've been feeling so anxious they haven't been able to exercise. So I like to recommend lower glycemic fruit, like berries, because they're just going to contribute less to the sugar load on the body. But again, when it comes to fruit, it's a couple of servings. It's not, because fruit are healthy doesn't mean eat the whole bunch of grapes or the entire pineapple, because they're actually very high in sugar and may not be the best for you. And if you have a predisposition to type 2 diabetes, that's a longer conversation. So there are these nuances. There's no harm in eating these different foods and fruit together, but there are nuances around amounts. I'm not so much of a calorie counter, but I do care about the quality of food, and I do pay attention to portion control.
Great. I'm going to call on you. I can't pronounce your name. Is it Ishel?
Hi, Ixchel.
Ixchel.
Yeah,
Hi.
it's my name. Okay, Thank you. I have this question. Which magnesium do you recommend? Magnesium?
Which magnesium? So,
yeah.
I'm careful about that, and I'll tell you why. I'm not a spokesperson for brands, but in my practice, magnesium supplementation can be very helpful for anxiety conditions, but you could also get magnesium from avocados. So, I generally like to talk about food options first, and in my book, I list foods that are rich in magnesium that you can start to add in every day. But I try to stay away from sort of brand names and things like that because, because I don't want to call out one brand versus another.
Okay, and well, okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos.
Hello, Dr. Umban. Hello, Tal. We met in Madrid for South Summit. Just a question. There's like a trend on vegan, very, very strong trend on vegan. Seems at least here in Spain and some other countries. Is it like really better for like mental health and body health? Like, is it really much better?
So you're talking about what is the plant-based movement in the US or eating vegan? There's no harm. If that is working for you, if you're feeling good, having that diet, absolutely stick with it. But I will say that whether it's vegan or the carnivore diet, either of those or anyone in between may be missing certain nutrients. So if someone comes in with certain symptoms, I will work with them around what they may need to tweak in their diet. Now, for example, in a vegan diet, they don't necessarily consume omega-3s from seafood, obviously. So a good idea is an algal oil supplement that will actually bring back some omega-3s that may be helpful. So these are the things I work on with that personalized plan. I really can't say one of those is better than the other because I don't stand by that. I think that is what causes a lot of confusion for people. It's really a taking what you eat. And you say you came to me, Carlos, and said, well, I'm becoming vegan. I'm going to ask you, what are you eating? Are you getting enough nutrients from that? Should we be working with your primary care doctor to check your vitamin B12 level? Because you generally get that from meats, red meats, etc. So if over time you needed that, we should supplement it. So it becomes a specific discussion like that.
Gracias.
Thank you, Carlos. Christine.
Okay, can you hear me?
Can hear you well.
Okay, great, thank you. So I have sleep problems, and I'm not taking any medication. It's been 8 years. And so I haven't really been able to get a handle on it. And so I was just wondering if you can address like how to work on with that around with foods, and what I need to give up chocolate, which I love, high quality chocolate with a good alternative sugar source. So.
Right. So, one of the things is chocolate with artificial sweeteners is still an artificial sweetener. So be careful of what's in the source of what you're eating, because it could be disruptive in other ways. There's a whole chapter in my book on sleep and foods to think about cutting back on and foods to start including. But a quick tip around this are two things. One of the things you want to realize with sleep is that it's not something you just did today or yesterday. Obviously, like you shared, it's been for quite some time. Sleep hygiene is a very big part of it. Shutting off devices, paying attention to blue light sources, not going to the supermarket late at night and being under the bright lights. Even if you're doing good food shopping, all of that impacts our sleep. If you're leaning on, I'm not saying that you're doing this, but if you're leaning on a glass of wine during the pandemic because you've had struggle sleeping, if you're doing that, it could actually be disrupting your sleep architecture. And that's very different from having a glass of wine with dinner, but not really being concerned to have that help you sleep. It's a different meaning and use of that. So you want to think about all of those things, and then think about some of the foods that you can add in that could actually help calm you down to get you to sleep. But what I'm trying to say is it's the sleep hygiene. It's looking at what you're eating, and it's getting you ready for bed. And if you eat that chocolate, have it early in the day if you're concerned that it's keeping you awake. A raw, natural dark chocolate is very rich in serotonin, magnesium. It has a lot of good properties, but when it has sugar in it, but when it has added sugar or added artificial sweetener, it tends to, veer a little bit away from what we want you to be having. But a small square, there's no harm in that. And maybe have it early in the day if you're worried that it's keeping you up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you, Christine. Over to Shu. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
All right. So I have come across a lot of people who ask me about this frontline doctors website. They're saying there's some doctors recommending the COVID patients to have like bioflavonoids, NAC, zinc, and C, vitamin C, to help with their overcoming their conditions. I want to have your opinion about those nutritions. Is it universal or should be individual?
It's never universal. And that's where medicine is these days. Medicine is highly personalized, as is nutrition and mental health. Coronavirus, as a physician, I'm dealing with it in my practice, but it's not my specialty. So while I'm up to date on the current stats, I really don't feel comfortable saying, use this supplement or NAC or something like that. What I can say is having your immunity be 70% of your immune system is in the gut. So how you eat is significantly important. That doesn't mean that you have to rush out and eat immune boosting foods, because to the contrary, what we really want is a healthy immune system, not one that's overactive. So some simple foods are things like red bell pepper and kiwi, which are rich in vitamin C. People tend to reach just for citrus fruit. So that's a food source of how to think about it. But I don't feel like I'm really up to date on the most current COVID research in food. It's not my specialty, but that's some of the guidance I can offer you around immune boosting foods.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shu. Rebecca.
Hello, thank you both for doing this. I actually have a more general question, which is that I had never heard of nutritional psychiatry until yesterday when my sister forwarded me this link. So I'm interested in the field in general and how you came to this and whether you're an outlier or if this is a new trend that I just don't know about. Thank you.
So this is definitely a more nascent field, one that I'm certainly pioneering as fast and as hard as I can in the United States. I came to it, from the different areas of my training. I've spoken about this on lots of free and available podcasts, in my book and in other places. And nutritional psychiatry is certainly part of the food as medicine movement. I would say that fewer psychiatrists than I would like practice this way. That's not any criticism of them, but it's not mainstream as yet. But I also like to point out that meditation and mindfulness, which I grew up doing learned from my grandparents, was not mainstream when I was in residency or in medical school. And now, it's tough to pass a corner in the United States without a yoga studio or the word mindfulness. So I think everything takes time to build and grow and be understood. What's great and what I feel proud of is that we're bringing forth a lot of good and strong evidence that is research-based in this field. It's growing. It's not at the point of being prescriptive, and it does not exclude the use of medications or therapy, which I find extremely valuable, especially therapies for my patients. I just feel that there need to be more tools in the toolbox for individuals. So you haven't heard about it because it's more nascent, it's newer. I'm developing, the textbook for the American Psychiatric Association on this subject. So I'm very grateful that they're not only acknowledging it, they want to bring this work forward. And I think the more times that we can have these discussions and realize there are more options, and I hope that this field will grow in the right direction.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's go over to Shauna.
What should I get?
Good afternoon. I wanted to ask.
To the 7th floor, the alarm went off.
I wanted to ask, specifically geared toward grief or depression, if there were a couple of recipes that you would recommend. And I ask this because I buy the things on the list and then I end up throwing them away because they go bad because I don't have like a recipe to cook them with. So it's maybe something I could Google.
Sure. Absolutely. So chapter 11 of my book was the hardest chapter to write because it was developing the recipes. And the reason I struggled so much is I didn't want people to have to worry about making a souffle, because how many times do we buy the ingredients and not use them? They end up going bad and we throw them out. So I really focused in on each chapter has recipes that go with the chapter. But here's the thing. They're recipes that you can interchange with doesn't have to be a condition as much as they're healthy, they're based on good, basically good nutrition and nutrients that are going to benefit your brain health. And they're simple. They're simple and they're straightforward, because it's really not about trying to be a culinary specialist or chef, but it's about getting in the kitchen and being able to use those nutrients. One of my favorites is actually the spinach dal recipe, which is lentil soup in the book. Another one is a marinade that I created with a fermented food called miso that I mentioned earlier. And I create a marinade and do it with roasted veggies, but you could do that with the same marinade with chicken if you eat chicken. You could do it with roasted cauliflower if that's something that you eat. So those are, a couple of ways to start thinking about it. Start with maybe one or two simple things that you enjoy and practice making them so that you kind of get into the habit. And I think the other thing that's helpful is meal preparation. And what I do in chapter 11 is walk you through equipment to buy, how to set up your kitchen, how to prepare for meals, because there's something called mise en place, which is getting your things in place that chefs do that just becomes easier for you to handle it so that the food becomes easier to get on the table.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Miriam.
Thank you so much for this talk. It's very interesting. I have a question. It's not really mental health related. I mean, kind of related, but not directly. What would you suggest for, if you have any suggestions for menopause, for hot flashes and symptoms of menopause? Or
so it's interesting, it's interesting. I am actually releasing my first virtual course in nutritional psychiatry this Monday. And any friend of Tal can receive a special discount from us with the word partner, P-A-R-T-N-E-R. The reason I mention it is this is a great question. I could not include all of my research in my book because any author will tell you, I'm sure Tal will say this, that you have a certain number of pages to share what you can, and we couldn't cover topics like menopause and, you know, period pains and migraine headaches and things like that. But what we did in my course that is virtual and it's a webinar style is we included these special topics. And, you know, one of the things to think about with conditions like menopause is how you're eating, making sure that you check with your doctor to see if there's anything they can do for your symptom management, including things like anti-inflammatory foods in what you're eating, leaning on those fiber-rich foods and the folate-rich greens and things like that. But we flesh it out a lot more as well because it's a topic that I think is very significant to a lot of people. So I'm glad you asked.
Thank you. How could I access the webinar?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. So just look up my website, which is umanaidoomd.com, and you'll find the information for my course there. You should follow me on social media because I give out tons of information all the time. That's at DRUMANAIDOO, and subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll get information there as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you for that. Jean-Pierre.
Yes. Hello, Tal. Hello, Uma.
Hi.
I have a question. I'm interested in learning more about the study on nutrition science. Do you have any advice? And do you know the study on nutrition science from Stanford? And would you advise it?
Oh, the one I cited?
I don't know if you cited it, but there's a Stanford nutrition science study. It's online. It's from Get Smarter. I don't know if you know that, or any other advice on studying nutrition science.
Oh, are you saying to study it as a course?
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I think there are lots of different programs in the United States. I'm not sure if you are based here, but I think just finding the best path that fits what you want to do. I know the West Coast has some great nutrition schools. In Boston, we have the only freestanding nutrition school in the country, the Friedman School of Nutrition. I think exploring what it is you want to study within their course offerings becomes what's important in terms of whatever else you're doing with your life.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa, can you unmute yourself, please?
Hi, and Happy New Year from Miami.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I have been, for the past 6 months, exercising, eating a very healthy diet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like salads and tuna fish. And for sweets, I have fruit. And my weight has not budged. And I've had this problem my whole life, but it's been the opposite of gaining weight. I've been very skinny my whole life. And now that I've gotten older, I'm chubby. Okay, so the fact that my weight, I'm doing all the right things and my weight has not budged. I went to the health food store and I said, well, what else can I do? And they gave me this jar of keratin, collagen powder to put in a drink every morning to try and burn some fat. I need something to give me some kind of motivation to keep going, because again, exercise and eating all these salads and tuna fish, it isn't working for me. I'm stuck at a certain weight and it will not go down. So what can I add as a supplement that's easy that burns fat?
Right. So there's no easy answer to that question. I'm not trying to avoid your question, but I do think that the conversation you need to be having with your doctors around your metabolic health, because something is preventing that weight from being shed, right? It sounds like you're doing a lot of the good things for yourself and for your body. I have nothing against the collagen supplement. I'm not quite sure how they mean for you to add that in. So it's just one ingredient that you could add to a smoothie. I'm not quite sure in the spectrum of how you're eating, but have your doctor check your metabolic panels, look to see whether there's a family history that might be going on and impacting you, because that probably is the bigger key to unlocking what's going on so that you can do that collaboratively with how you're eating. And the only other point I will make is fruit is healthy. It's not unhealthy, but the type of fruit and the quantity that you're eating, if you're struggling with weight, becomes important. So a couple of small servings of different types of berries become, are good to add in. But again, if you have a propensity towards type 2 diabetes or other, glucose impairment, impaired conditions such as diabetes and other forms, that's a discussion you only have with your doctor as well. So those are the guidelines I think you should at least try to figure out what this metabolic, it's almost like you're at a metabolic, something is going on with your metabolism where things are stuck, and you need to figure out with him or her how to get around that.
All right, thank you. And he's already said that it's the stress in my life. That stress hormone creates something.
So if it's related to cortisol and the stress in your life, then that's a discussion around, maybe the things that are stressing you is restricting the diet and exercising, maybe, because over exercise or exercising at a rate that imbalances your hormones can also cause stress, right? It's a whole picture. It's not just one thing. If he's mentioned stress, then mindfulness, meditation, using apps that help you with stress, walking, outdoor time, looking at how much of exercise you're doing and seeing with an exercise physiologist or trainer if you should cut back on certain things so that you're not, because you can also kind of stress your body by over exercising, right? So it's finding that right balance as well. But definitely handling the stress and eating for stress becomes important as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Elisa.
Yeah.
I earlier mentioned the blue zones, Uma, and some of the things that they do, and one of the things that they focus on is moderation. And it's a theme that has come up a few times, including now in your responses. We have time for one more question. Unfortunately, there are so many hands up, but there is hope because Uma is starting a course on Monday, and you can find more information about it on umanaidoomd.com. I sent out the website in the chat. So you can find out much more through that course. But let's turn to Esther. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much. And good afternoon from sunny Orlando. I'm hoping, doctor, that you can provide me with information or possibly direct me to source of information about food and scleroderma locale, and also food and leaky gut, because I'm being laughed at by traditional doctors. And I'm just trying to find, hopefully there is a solution, if not to heal the situation or reverse it, possibly to keep it where it is so it doesn't get worse. Thank you.
Sure. So I think the easier way for me to answer this is that the leaky gut, understanding that it's certainly not, people are laughing at you, I'm really sorry, but this is a real condition that is happening in many people, and it could be related to stress, it could be related to diet, it could be related to many things. So one of the things you want to think about is how can you adapt your diet? I talk in my book about dysbiosis, which is really that imbalance in the gut, and that imbalance that leads to leaky gut, which is otherwise called intestinal permeability. It's a real thing. It affects from anything, whether it's acne in some individuals, to joint pains and physical conditions, also affects mental health pretty significantly. So while I don't know the specifics around the scleroderma, one of the things I can say is paying attention to eating healthier for your gut could actually reduce that inflammation and help with that healing. It could just take time to get to that point. I've seen people take 3 to 6 months, even longer, depending on how severe it is. But you're on the right path to trying to get that healed. And there's certainly resources, not just my book, but that you can find maybe a functional medicine doctor who has a specialty with gastroenterology could be helpful to you in tweaking that even further for the leaky gut part.
Thank you. Actually, she's the one who said it doesn't exist. It's a mumbo jumbo Google kind of disease, and I was very
a functional
surprised.
medicine gastroenterologist.
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised.
Very well known one.
Well,
yeah.
Get a second opinion, Esther.
Yeah, I would say get a
Absolutely.
second opinion, because there are definitely
Thank
more
you.
doctors in functional medicine that work very effectively like this. So.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
that.
Esther. Wow, Uma, we could have gone on for days, but we need to eat, so we're going to stop.
We need to. It's almost dinner time on Easter.
Any final words just before we say goodbye?
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Tal, and thank everyone for their patience with my schedule and everything that happened, and how much I enjoyed speaking with you. And I'm happy to come back or do a follow-up if there's interest. I know there are a lot of hands up that we didn't get to. But thank you for the opportunity to share my work. I'm such a fan of what you do and your academy. So it was an honor to be here. And I think my parting word would be that, if it's one thing you take away from anything I said today, it's that, using nutrition as part of our lifestyle is part of a journey into healing and better health. It's not a quick fix or a sudden change, but we can all start, right now, with what we're doing in our pantry or our kitchen, or what we even choose for dinner tonight.
And what a better time to start than the beginning of a new year.
Yes.
With these new practices. Thank you so much, Uma. This was
Thank you.
Fascinating, informative, practical, and all that is left for us to do is to wish you and everyone a happy, healthy, and tasty new year.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Care.
Thanks all for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Amazing.